Andrew, it's a significant time in terms of harness racing and the handicapping system because it's about to change nationwide. Let's just back the track up a little bit to the initial points-based system coming in on a trial basis in Auckland. How did that come into vogue?
Well, it all started sort of about this time last year where we were getting some submissions from the Trainers and Drivers Association. They were acting on behalf of other sectors of the industry as well. So eventually what we decided to do was give the trainers and drivers, send them away to let them develop it a bit more, see what they can come back to us. And we had a handicapping meeting scheduled for April last year. So it was a pretty long, robust meeting, and we tossed around the options of where we could go, what we could do we change what we're doing, tinker with it, or do we go and look at something else? So it was decided that we're going to have a look at developing a ratings-based point system based around the system that these guys, that was the submission. And from there, away we went, and off we went. We had a series of meetings, playing around with modelling and bits and pieces. And then obviously it was decided at the June meeting, just before the Harness Jewels of the Handicapping Subcommittee and latterly the HRNZ Board, that we're going to give this a crack in the North Island from August 1. So that's pretty much what happened. And there was obviously a pretty long process through there and a lot of work that had to be done.
All right, so it kicked off August 1, and initially it was 3 to 4 month trial. Clearly things in the eyes of the board and HRNZ, and I suppose collectively, went well because it was extended and now it's been brought into the South Island as well.
Yeah, well the early signs are pretty positive. I mean, like anything in change in harness racing, it's, I guess by nature people in harness racing are a little bit conservative, and a quantum type change of this is pretty significant. So people had to wrap their heads around it first and foremost, but I guess the North Island region were baying for something to change because they were struggling for horse numbers and they were looking for answers. So the point system initially started off pretty well because it was grouping those horses together and giving those horses the opportunities to perform. Numbers were originally up pretty well in terms of average field sizes, the betting per race was up and other things. So there's some real positivity there. Unfortunately, little things like how the central districts reacted, not reacted, but their horse numbers have struggled a bit this year. Others have been okay. Just recently at Auckland, the two meetings at Auckland, the two premier meetings, have been pretty well supported. So we're getting good horses going to the good races and the lesser performing horses are racing away from there, and there's a mixtures thereof. So it seems to be working. There seems to be more acceptance as it goes on and people get to understand it. But because it is such a big change, it does take a wee while for people to sort of get the hang of it and get their heads around it.
Okay, you've talked about some of the measures in terms of how you've found it to be working and the central districts you mentioned there. There's been a little bit of movement in terms of what a horse gets for winning a race, say at a different venue like Manawatu. So let's just touch on how that comes about and the discretion, I suppose, who makes those decisions.
I guess one of the big issues about the system is the discretion that the handicappers have. Okay, that's myself and Kevin Smith, who's acting in the North Island. Now, the standard sort of points allotment for races under $9,000 or less will be 8 points for a race 9,000 or less, 10 points for a race up to $20,000, and then 10 to 12 points for premier races, group races slightly higher again. Trotters get 6 points for a low stake win and 8. But here's the thing. Obviously, when horses having to travel longer distances and race for lesser stakes, there has to be some relativity there in terms of the penalty they get. They couldn't have half points because that could drive horses away from the major centres to the lesser venues, which would be counterproductive. So there had to be some sort of relief for those horses racing in weaker company for less money, but also keep it relative so we're getting the right horses going to the right meetings in the right places.
Okay, so where do the age group penalties in the current system, which is about to change obviously in the South Island, your first win as a 2-year-old was effectively penalty free, and every second win as a 3-year-old. How does that work now?
Well, the concessions have changed a lot over the years. They've sort of been scaled back a little bit, but under this system what's going to happen is if you're a 3-year-old, let's start with those. Your first win's normal penalty, your second win, if it's under $15,000, and every second one thereafter, if it's under $15,000, you get a half points for those. So one of the key premises of this system was, okay, the concessions were too much. The better younger horses were getting it too good, and we had to do something to mitigate that, and this is a step in that direction. So there are still some concessions there, but obviously those horses will get pushed up the grades further, and of course the key is for the racing structure of it and the clubs and us to make sure we put on races for those horses.
Just going back to a comment before, you talked about the lack of numbers in the North Island. It is a challenge, there's no question about that at all. The same problem isn't prevalent in the South Island, particularly away from, say, winter, where it is a challenge, there's a lot of race meetings. Therefore, how do you think the system is going to work in the South Island?
Well, a lot of the measures you do and you look at suggest it's going to work well, because what we can do, the structure of racing is quite good in Canada, in this particular area here anyway. Okay, we've got Addington, if they're racing on a Friday night, they're racing for generally higher stakes, and if they're not racing for higher stakes, they're playing second fiddle to another meeting like a Geraldine or an Amberley or an Ashburton or that sort of thing, or a Methven. So we were able to structure the racing to have good horses racing for higher money, and we can have condition type of horses racing for less money. So the way the ratings work is that you can have lower rated horses racing, you know, not for the higher dollars, but you're corralling the horses to where they need to be, so they can be in competitive environment, and the higher rated horses who want to race for more money, who can race for more money, who are competitive in that environment, can race each other and earn their money in that regard.
Could this not have been achieved under the current system though? Isn't that more a programming issue, and therefore did the clubs have too much power? And I'm asking you for your opinion here, and I know it might be your opinion, not necessarily the opinion of Harness Racing New Zealand, but could this not have been achieved, first of all, under the current system?
It's very tricky because there's so many conflicting things that happen. It's very complex when it comes to funding, when it comes to how the race meetings and the races themselves are structured, and it comes back to what you want to do, what clubs want to achieve. The power has always been with the clubs because they've voted things, and that's a historic thing. I mean, that hasn't changed, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. So the whole industry is built around the clubs, you know, providing the income to everybody who works with the industry or the owners, and of course give the punters the races to bet on. So it could have been, anything's possible, I guess, Greg, but under the structure that's going to be in play here, this was viewed as the most logical way of doing it. And hoping it's going to play out that way, but because you know, the industry needs it, and we were told, we were given a clear mandate for change by the sector groups within harness racing and the board. So that's what we've gone and done.
This has come at significant cost, and without putting a monetary figure on it, the IT cost, because it must have been a massive undertaking for John Toohey and his team to you know, set the computer system up to allow for the rating of all the horses. Obviously, Kevin Smith's now been employed. You've got to be pretty confident it's going to work, because otherwise you couldn't have gone down this path.
Well, you have to throw the resources at it to make sure it works. Because if we try to go at it sort of half-assed, I guess you're going to end up with egg on your face, aren't you? So we had to go in boots and all and make sure everything was there. I mean, we're very, very lucky in harness racing, and it's one of the things that I mean, let's be honest, there are going to be increased costs with this, because there has to be, because of the nature of the system and how it has to be resourced. But in saying that, for all those years, those decades of having the system in, and us being able to, you know, you've worked with us before, and how it all works, is the amount of efficiencies that system's created, and the cost saving to this point has been brilliant. And the services we actually provide in this area are great. So whilst there's been a lot of man hours involved, and obviously there has been a cost, this cost has to to bear fruit at the end of the day. And we're not going to know that for a while. We really aren't. We're going to need we're going to need a good amount of data. We're going to need a good period that we're going to actually make a good, accurate assessments of how this is actually done. And if we can tinker with what we've got now or revert something back, I don't know, but we're not going to know until we give it a full go.
So is it still a trial?
At
what point does it become not a trial, though? I mean, are we there now?
Well, people have slightly differing ideas. I mean, I think if you're completely honest about it, you said up until the end of the season, there has to be something of a trial phase. And we have made no secret of the fact that there's going to be a pretty fulsome review come at that season's end, and then we're going to know exactly where we stand. Whether that's enough time to get a really good idea of what the situation is, I'm not 100% sure, because we haven't done that yet. Yeah. But that's the plan. I think that to say that August 1, once we get to there, we're going to have a lot better understanding of how the system has bedded in, whether we've had some benefits of it, and where the industry wants to take it from that point on.
education process for both participants, I'm talking trainers, drivers, and owners for that matter, and the punters. Where's that at, and what are we likely to see? Because it is such a big change that some education around this is clearly required.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the key things that we know, I mean, we have to engage with the punters and we have to engage with the participants and make sure they know what's going on. So the guiding principles that we've put together are, some would say, complex. They kind of have to be, because the more you delve into it, the more you work through the system, the more you realise that certain anomalies crop up and you have to account for those. And when you've got a whole lot of things that happen, you actually want to explain them. So on the back of the guiding principles, we've actually explained the way we treat certain circumstances and the rationale for why this horse may get less points than that horse, or the horse that's higher up the ratings only gets a few points as opposed to the horse that's lower on the ratings. So we've explained that out as best we can. So that's that. So if you want to take the time to read that, if anyone wants to take the time to read it, they can. But of course, obviously we need to engage with people, so we want to communicate with people through racing publications. We're going to have stuff in race books for a period. For how long, we're not entirely sure. It's going to depend on, I think,
on your website
demand
as well?
Yeah, and of course, obviously the website, it's a go-to place. There's lots of information there. We're going to have updated lists of the horses so people know where they're at. And of course, obviously, just by going to each horse individually, you can click on their ratings and you can look at their history as well. So people, when they do that, they're going to get a feel. And of course, they've had the background of Auckland and the North Island and Cambridge and Manawatu and the Central Districts for that period. So hopefully people are going to get a feel for it. And the one thing I think is a positive about it is fundamentally we're rating horses from, say down low 40 to 50 up to 130, which is not that far removed from how the galloping rating systems work. So people can have a perspective that if you're rated 130, you're a very good horse, you're Winx, you're Lazarus, you're that sort of thing. And if you're rated down low, you're obviously not of that ilk. But I think having some symmetry there, synergies between other systems and rating systems, how they've worked, and this I think is positive. But at the same time, harness racing's a different monster to galloping, obviously.
Could we have kept the assessment and had the rating beside the assessment? It's certainly in the initial stages, just to help with that education process. So if the rating band for a C1 is, say, and as I understand it, everyone starts as a rating 50, so you win a race, you get your 8 points. So therefore, the C1 rating band is 58 to whatever, 65, say, just for example. Could we not have had C1 rating 62?
That was the discussion we had. It was viewed as if it would be counterproductive, because it could lead to more confusion, or people could fundamentally be a bit disgruntled that why is this horse that could be rated a C3 racing against these C1 horses. But the ratings tell us that because the horse's performances are such that it's had so many outs that it's managed to drop it way down the ratings. That is why it is in that race against those horses. This is the whole premise of racing like with like. There has been some consternation about the fact that some horses that have won more races are coming back in the ratings. But again, that's just, when there's a transition, there's always going to be a bit of a potentially little messy phase, and it will
winners
sort
and
itself
losers,
out.
yeah.
There's always, no matter what, I mean, I've seen, this is my second system change, and I haven't been here that long.
Yeah.
And we did our road shows we did. I mean, we had something like 6 different systems since 1994, and there's been some pretty rapid changes and some significant changes as well. None probably more so than this, but they're still pretty significant nonetheless.
Horses can gain points by placing, therefore can a horse effectively go up a rating band without winning a race?
Or they can. That's not the intention. So what we're trying to do is let the horses that are battling drop down the ratings. The horses that are earning money, running placings, being competitive where they are, stay where they are, and the ones that are winning go up. I think that was one of the failings of the drop back system that we had currently, is because it was kept simple for a reason, but with that simplicity came a whole lot of anomalies, like horses that could literally run 10 seconds and drop back a grade, which is not fair and not right. So what we're looking to do is just keep those horses expanded. But if you're a horse that's running placings in feature races and you're reasonably lowly rated, your rating are going to go up. A horse like a classic example was a horse like Delightful Memphis, who has run into Spanish Armada untold times, but she's won a lot of money by running second. So her rating has increased by running seconds and thirds in Group 1 races. But the intention is to keep the horses that are running placings round about where they are, let the ones that are battling drop back, and the ones that are winning go forward. So you're actually getting a better spread of the ratings, and we've actually got measures in place to make sure we can assess whether the general population's rating is going up or down as well.
All right, and obviously maiden is sacrosanct, so you get your maiden, you're an MR until such time as you win your maiden.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
That was the belief. Some would like to go to a sort of a free market rating system, if you will, which means they can all get jumped in together. But I think for the time being, that would be probably perhaps too much. Maybe who knows? Maybe one day that happens. But I think for the time being, certainly, the expectation is that as a maiden, you've got a right to race horses of your kind, which are horses that have not won a race before.
Certainly an interesting time in the game. I'm sure that every second phone call at the moment, if not every one, is about this, and there'd be a few challenges there in answering them too, Andrew, because it is evolving so quickly, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, let's be honest, there's been time pressures associated with this, because obviously once you get to a certain stage in the Auckland and the North Island situation, we came to a bit of a precipice. Where do we go? And the board felt that we've got to go forward and do it quickly. There was some talk of the 1st of August being the start, but it was decided that this 13th of March was the time. So that brought with it time pressures. And yeah, things are evolving, things are coming, and we're coming up on things, and we're trying to fix them as well as we go. But it's not to say we're not organised. The whole process has been very, very robust, and we've been working pretty hard to get it where it needs to be come the 13th of March.
Anyone not sure of how this is going to work, or what they need to understand, the best place to go is the website and read through those guidelines?
Absolutely. A lot of stuff's there. We've actually sent out an email, an end user that's got a whole lot of data, and that's gone out to our database, which is something like 8,000 strong. So that's owners, trainers, stable hands, even people who registered to our competitions online before. People who are registered for that are going to get that, and they can, with a click of a button, they can go and read and look and what they need to look at.
All right, certainly a challenging time. Thanks very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing how this unfolds in the next sort of 6 months anyway.
No problems, Greg. It's going to be a good challenge, but looking forward to it.